Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
Leaders from 32 countries came together in a city called The Hague. This was a very important meeting for NATO. NATO is a group of countries that promise to help each other if one is attacked. The meeting happened in the Netherlands. It was a short meeting, just for about one day. The main reason for the meeting was to talk about money. NATO countries need to spend money on defense, like soldiers and equipment. Before, the goal was to spend 2% of a country's money, GDP, on defense. But at this meeting, there was talk about a new, much higher goal. They wanted countries to promise to spend 5%. President Trump of the United States was at this meeting. He had strong ideas about this defense spending. He wanted other countries to pay more. There were also other important things happening in the world. These things made the meeting feel tense. Leaders hoped they could show they were all working together. They wanted to agree on the money for defense. They also wanted to show they were united about helping Ukraine. Ukraine is a country that is in a war. The leaders met for a special dinner. Then they had one main discussion. President Trump told reporters that he thought this meeting would be a big success for him. He thought it would show that his ideas for the United States were working well. The meeting was planned to be short and focus mainly on the new spending goal. This was to make sure the leaders could agree and show they were united, even with the strong demands from President Trump and the difficult global situation. 2. Why this meeting? NATO is a group of countries from North America and Europe. It started in 1949. Its main idea is that if one country is attacked, all the others will help. This is called Article 5. It is a very important rule for NATO. Over time, more countries joined. In 2025, there were 32 countries in the group. NATO leaders meet sometimes. This meeting in The Hague was very important. It happened more than 3 years after Russia started a big war in Ukraine. The war made many European countries worry more about their safety. They felt that the security situation in Europe was not safe anymore. Because of this, they started spending more money on defense after 2022. This summit was also the first big NATO meeting with the president in his second time in office. A few years before, in 2018, there was another NATO meeting where the president was unhappy about countries not spending enough money. That meeting was difficult. So, for the Hague meeting, things were planned very carefully. The people who planned the meeting wanted to avoid problems. They made the meeting short, about 24 hours. They focused on just one main thing: how much money countries spend on defense. They talked about a new goal for spending, which was 5% of a country's money. This was much more than the old goal of 2%. One reason the meeting was planned like this was for the president. An official said that the president needed to get credit for this 5% goal. So, the meeting was made simple to avoid difficult talks about other things, like the war in Ukraine or new military plans. The main goal was to agree on the spending number, so the president could say it was a success. European leaders also felt the time was right to increase spending because the world felt less safe. They even welcomed the pressure to spend more. 3. What they talked about. The main topic of the talks was how much money countries should spend on defense. Before this meeting, the goal for NATO countries was to spend at least 2% of their country's total money, GDP, on defense. The U.S. president wanted a much higher goal, 5%. This was a big change and the central point for discussion among the leaders at the meeting. The global security situation was a big reason for these talks. The war in Ukraine was happening, and this made many European countries feel that they needed stronger defenses. Leaders agreed that the situation in Europe had changed a lot. They felt that safety in Europe could not be taken for granted anymore. So, increasing defense spending was seen as important to be ready for possible future problems and to deter potential attackers. The leaders also talked a lot about sharing the cost of defense fairly. The idea was that all countries should pay their part for common security. There was a feeling that the United States had been paying too much compared to other allies for a long time. The discussion was about how to share this burden better among all member countries, so that everyone contributed enough to protect the alliance. Another very important point discussed was Article 5. This is the rule at the heart of NATO that says that if one NATO country is attacked, all other countries will see it as an attack on them and will help. People talked about the United States' promise to follow this rule. The U.S. president expressed some doubt about this commitment in public, saying it depends on certain things. This caused worry among some European allies, even though NATO leaders tried to say the U.S. commitment was still total and strong. The talks also included bigger security issues happening around the world. Besides Russia and Ukraine, leaders were watching other conflicts closely. For example, recent problems in the Middle East were part of the background discussions. This showed that NATO needs to think about security in different parts of the world, not just in Europe. Allies discussed looking beyond Europe for potential security challenges. But not all countries found the 5% goal easy or necessary. There were clear divisions among the allies on this big jump in spending. Some countries, like those closer to Russia, already spent a lot and pushed for everyone to reach the new goal quickly. But other countries felt the 5% target was too high and difficult to achieve. Spain had very strong concerns about it. Its leaders said that reaching 5% would be very difficult for Spain's economy and might not be helpful. They were one of the countries that spent the least on defense and found the new, high goal unreasonable for their situation. This disagreement showed that getting everyone to agree on the exact plan was not simple, even if they agreed on the general idea of spending more. 4. Mr. Trump's big plan. Mr. Trump had a clear goal for the meeting. He wanted the countries in NATO to spend much more money on defense. His message to them was strong. He said they have to pay what everybody else has to pay. He specifically mentioned Spain, calling it notorious because it spent very little compared to others. Just before the meeting, Mr. Trump took some actions that caused attention. The United States ordered attacks on some nuclear places in Iran. He also announced a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran. These important global events happened right before the leaders met in The Hague. They showed that big things were happening in the world. Mr. Trump also talked about a very important part of NATO, Article 5. This is the rule that says if one country is attacked, all countries must help. Mr. Trump was asked if the United States would protect an ally that followed the rules if it was attacked. His answer was, "Depends on your definition." This comment made some countries feel unsure about the U.S. promise to defend them. The United States put a lot of pressure on the Allies to agree to the new spending goal of 5%. Reports from diplomats said that the U.S. Defense Secretary gave the countries an ultimatum. They had to accept the 5% goal by the time of the meeting itself. This deadline was very strict. Because of this pressure, the European countries had to agree to the main idea of the 5% goal quickly. The United States got the main promise it wanted. The people who planned the meeting knew Mr. Trump wanted to show a big success. They organized the meeting carefully so that he could look like he won. They made it very short, about 1 day. The main topic was the spending plan. Other important issues were not discussed deeply. They did not write a long final statement, which could cause problems. There was only one main meeting. The Prime Minister of the Netherlands even wrote a message to Mr. Trump, which was later shared. He said that Europe was going to pay in a big way, and that this would be Mr. Trump's win. This shows that the Allies understood what Mr. Trump wanted from the meeting. Every part of the meeting seemed planned to make sure Mr. Trump could say he had achieved his goal. He wanted to declare major wins for his country's ideas. The meeting was designed to create a good picture of success for him, especially on the topic of defense spending. 5. Europe's mixed feelings. Leaders in Europe had different thoughts about the new defense spending goal. Many, especially countries near Russia, felt the higher targets were good and needed. They saw the security situation had changed a lot. Europe's top official, Ursula von der Leyen, said Europe's defense was now awake. Germany's leader, Friedrich Merz, announced plans to make his country's army stronger. He said this was because of Russia. Many agreed that spending 2% of their country's money was not enough anymore. The war in Ukraine showed that armies needed more. It also showed that Europe might need to protect itself more in the future. But not everyone was happy with the 5% goal. Some countries worried it was too high. They thought it would be hard to find that much money. Spain was the country most against the new goal. Spain spent the least on defense before this meeting. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, said the 5% target was not fair or helpful for his country. He worried it would mean less money for schools and hospitals. Spain's government also had people in it who did not want to spend more on the military. This made it difficult for their leader to agree easily. Spain asked if it could be different for them, or if the goal could be a choice, not a must. To keep all the countries together and show they were united, they worked hard to find a way. They needed everyone to agree on the new goal, even if some countries had worries. A compromise was made. It was agreed that most countries would aim for 5% by the year 2035. But Spain was allowed to spend less. They only had to meet their old targets, which were much lower. Other countries, like Italy, also got a longer time to reach the goal. This compromise helped the leaders agree in the end. It meant everyone could sign the final paper, even with Spain getting a special deal. It showed that while Europe saw the need for more defense, agreeing on how much and how fast was not easy for everyone. 6. People's thoughts and worries. People in European countries thought about their safety and defense. A recent study showed that a large number of Europeans were concerned about security in Europe. Most people in Europe also thought that European countries should have a common defense plan and work together more to protect themselves. The war happening in Ukraine was the main reason for many people's worries about security. This general feeling of worry helped leaders feel they had support for stronger defense. In the United States, people had different opinions about NATO. A study there found that about 60% of Americans saw NATO in a good way. However, this view was different between the two main political groups. People from one group were much less likely to like NATO than people from the other group. It was reported that the president believed many Americans supported his views on getting NATO countries to spend more money. He felt Americans thought it was fair for Europe to pay more. Some people in America might not understand why NATO is still needed to help keep peace in Europe. Maybe because there have been no big wars there for a long time. They might feel Europe should protect itself more. While leaders met inside the buildings in The Hague, many people gathered outside to protest. Hundreds of people who do not support war showed their feelings. They held signs and chanted messages against NATO. They spoke against spending more money on armies and weapons. They also mentioned conflicts in other parts of the world, like the fighting in Gaza. One person protesting, who was from Iran and lived in the Netherlands, asked why governments were spending so much on armies when many people were suffering and needed help with everyday life. This protest showed that some people worry that more military spending means less money for important public services like schools, healthcare, or even lower taxes. They felt that meetings like the summit made the world more prepared for war, not peace. In countries like Spain, some political groups also felt this way, believing the idea of spending 5% of their country's money on defense was too much and would hurt their people and public services. These worries from different groups showed that the decisions made at the summit were important to many people, even if they were not inside the meeting rooms. 7. The secret talks. Many important talks happened away from the main meetings. These were secret talks between leaders and their helpers. One big problem was Spain. Spain did not want to promise to spend 5% of its money on defense. Spain said it was too much money for them. Diplomats worked hard to find a way. They changed some words in the final paper. This helped Spain agree. The paper said, "All allies commit," instead of "we commit." This meant Spain had more freedom. Spain agreed to a lower goal, around 2.1% for important military needs. They did not promise the full 5%. One leader even wrote a letter to Spain's leader to help. The letter said Spain could find its own way with the spending goals. The countries also talked about when they must reach the 5% goal. Some countries wanted to do it faster, maybe by 2030. Other countries needed more time. They decided on a later time, by 2035. This gave everyone more years to get the money ready. Another talk was about what counts as defense spending. Does it only mean buying guns and planes? Or can it include other things? For example, fixing roads so military vehicles can move, keeping computers safe from attacks, or even hospitals that help soldiers. It looked like the idea of spending might become wider to help reach the number. In these quiet talks, there were also worries about soldiers from the United States. Some people thought the U.S. might move some soldiers out of Europe. Also, maybe the U.S. would pay less money for the NATO organization itself. These worries were talked about carefully, not in public. The main goal of all these talks was to make sure everyone looked united in public. Leaders did not want people to see big disagreements. So they finished the main agreement about the 5% goal. Some smaller questions about the money and the time will be talked about later. The secret talks helped the leaders announce success at the end of the meeting. 8. What happened in the end? The big meeting finished. People waited to hear the results. What did the leaders agree on? What happened with the defense money? The main thing was a new goal for spending on defense. The countries agreed to try and spend 5% of their money, their GDP, on defense. This was a much higher number than before. They set a date for this, the year 2035. But not all countries agreed to the same thing. Spain had problems with spending so much money. Spain did not agree to the full 5%. They got a special deal. They will spend a lower amount, around 2.1%, on their basic defense needs. Other countries also got more time or special conditions. The U.S. leader was happy with the result. He said it was a big success for him and for the country. He felt the other countries were agreeing to pay a lot more, which he had asked for. The leaders also talked about Ukraine. They said they would continue to help Ukraine with money and supplies. But they did not say that Ukraine could join NATO soon. There was no new plan for Ukraine's future in the alliance mentioned at the meeting. On the outside, the countries looked united. They shook hands and smiled. But behind the scenes, things were not so simple. There were still disagreements about many details. How exactly would they reach 5%? What kind of spending counts as defense? These questions were not fully answered. Experts and people who study these things had different ideas about the meeting. Some experts were positive. They said this new plan could make NATO stronger. They thought it was good that European countries would spend more on their own protection. They said this could be a good change. But other experts were not so sure. They said that just having a number, 5%, was not enough. They said it is more important to have real soldiers, real equipment, and enough supplies. They worried that the countries might just say they are spending more, but not really become stronger. They also said that making promises for the year 2035 is easy. It is harder to actually find the money and make the changes over many years. It is a big challenge to turn these promises into real defenses. So, the meeting set a new goal. It showed that countries agree to spend more. But the hard work of making it happen starts now. What do you think is the biggest challenge NATO faces in making this new spending pledge a reality?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.